Queen. I don't think this is anyone famous. I think this is just an average black person. I could be wrong about that. I don't recognize that person. Maybe it's a soccer player. But do we believe someone is bad because they are, in this case, of African origin? Social relations, attractiveness, mere exposure effect, repeated exposure to novel stimuli increases liking of them. Conceptions of attractiveness vary by culture. We have three different cultures here, three very different cultures. Obviously, we have a European culture or Caucasian standard of beauty. We have an African one. I believe this is a man. I know it's a man. I think he's from Mali, that area. I've seen pictures of these people before. This particular person, I'm not sure where she's from. I don't recognize that particular costume. I want to say somewhere in Central Asia, possibly Tibet, but I'm not sure about that. As I said, I don't recognize the costume. It doesn't look Islamic to me, but then again, I'm not a Muslim, so I'm not sure. I believe that would look kind of Buddhist to me. Anyway, the idea of what constitutes physical beauty is different from culture to culture. And that's an important thing to remember. And this repeated exposure to new, novel here means new stimuli, increases the chances of liking folk. At first, black people, when you first see them, are very different, and then eventually you realize everyone has 10 fingers and 2 ears and eyes that are more or less in the same place. Children don't find black people strange or very different, or Chinese people. They just sort of adopt them as we would to a dog, whether it's black or it's white or yellow or with spots. It doesn't matter to us. We realize it's a dog. So social relations, all of these are fairly positive aspects of social relations. Equity, a condition in which people receive from a relationship in proportion to what they give to it. This obviously does not seem to describe a family relationship. Usually, those of you who are parents in here, I'm not sure, I think we have one or two, parents are not in an equitable relationship with their children. Parents are doing everything for their children, and their children are just taking them for granted. They love their parents, but they don't realize how hard their parents are working to take care of them. So we would say a good, healthy adult relationship between adults. In a romantic relationship, there should be an equitable partnership where people are putting in the same amount of effort and getting the same amount of both frustration and pleasure from the relationship. And that would also be true of friendship, and that would also be true of work relationships, people that you know at work. This also involves self-disclosure, revealing intimate aspects of oneself to others. Okay, you're never going to get very close to someone if you don't let them become close to you. You have to tell some secrets about yourself. And altruism, another positive social relationship, the unselfish regard for the welfare of others, helping people when there's no benefit to you. This is altruistic. All religions have some aspect of this. In Christianity, we refer to the Good Samaritan. Altruism is an admirable thing. Social relations then deals with social exchange theory, the theory that our social behavior is an exchange process, the aim of which is to maximize benefits and minimize costs. This sounds a little bit like business, but it does make sense. What we do in a social environment, what we do in interacting with others, is an exchange. It's a form of economy when we're trying to get the most out of it and do the least. This makes sense. If all you really need is something that's no effort to me and there's some benefit that comes back, obviously this is a good deal. And I don't have to consider how to make this a fair thing. You come to me and say, I need a ride to the airport. And if you do that, I will whatever, clean your house. Well, fair enough, I'm not doing anything right now and I don't like cleaning my house. So sure, I'll take you to the airport and I assume you're going to clean my house for me at some point. Superordinate goals, this is the goal of a large group. Shared goals that override differences among people and require their cooperation. This is a classic definition of a group project that you're doing at work. You have a shared goal, and you may not like the person beside you, but as long as you are both aware that we have a larger thing to move towards, then you should do just fine working with someone that you don't particularly like. So, some of the larger ideas in social psychology. Number one, we construct our social reality. So we are responsible for how we see the world. Our social institutions are powerful and sometimes perilous. Perilous is another word for dangerous. Okay, dangerous is a little bit more negative than perilous. I would say sometimes can be dangerous. We have to be aware of that, and we'll get into some examples of that in a moment. Our attitudes shape and are shaped by behavior. So our attitudes shape our behavior, and our attitudes are shaped by our behavior. And that's then what we call social thinking, the first part of today's lesson. The second part was the social influences. Social influences, other people, society in general. Social influences shape behavior, and dispositions shape behavior. And social relations, the way social influences act on us to dictate how we act towards others. Social behavior is also biological behavior. Feelings and actions towards people are sometimes negative and sometimes positive. This may seem self-evident, but not necessarily so. And all of that together is applying social psychology. Social psychology's principles are applicable to everyday life. All right, let's see what we mean by that. Social psychology's big ideas, and there's 5 of these coming up. Remember, this particular presentation refers to your own textbook, so take notes as you see fit. Our social institutions are often powerful, but sometimes perilous. Okay, perilous, as I said again, is almost interchangeable with dangerous. As we face the world from inside a social institution, we go through dual processing. There's conscious and deliberate processing, and there's unconscious and automatic. The way that I can think of how this applies to something is large institutions such as the military or religion, where we function as an individual, but we're also part of a greater whole. Social psychology's big ideas. Number 2, social influences shape our behavior. So these are things that are out of our control, at least on a daily basis, that shape our behavior, such as locality, where we live, or where we are at that moment in our lives. If we're on vacation, we still are social beings. Our education level, okay, most of you are now starting a graduate program. You are much more educated than the average person on the street. This is not, don't confuse education and intelligence. They're not the same thing. Education is the collected wisdom of your culture, and sometimes many cultures, rather than your ability to do something based on how well your head works. Subscribed media, where you get your information from. If you just listen to one radio station or one television station that has a particular political influence or a particular religious influence, it is going to change how you see the world, and therefore how you behave in regards to the world and toward the world. Your particular culture and ethnicity are also important. You might be a member of a large minority group, or a very small minority group, or a majority group, or a very large majority, whatever the case may be. Your ethnicity also deals with your gender, things like that, how your society deals with your respective genders. Another big idea in social psychology, personal attitudes and dispositions. Internal forces. These are inner attitudes about specific situations. Example that comes to mind, obviously you'll be able to tell when I was taping this last night, television, most of the programming on Albanian television was postponed because there was a bad accident down near Vlora and 12 people were killed in a bus accident. And so most of the regular programming was canceled for live news programs that were covering this terrible accident. So if you were there at the accident, your inner attitudes about this sort of situation would govern your reaction and your interaction with other people at that moment, whether you were on the bus or whether you were in a car that got there before the police and everyone else got there. How do you respond? And your personality dispositions also have some reaction. Different people may react differently while facing the same situation. Let's say you weren't the very first person there, but you were there quite soon after the police first arrived, and the police are doing what they're supposed to do, which is kind of taking charge, making sure that the traffic moves, seeing if they can be of any immediate help. I believe the bus went down a ravine, so I'm sure they needed some pretty advanced rescue equipment to do anything. But let's assume that's what happened. You're there. There's only a couple of policemen there. They don't have an ambulance or anything. And they're asking you to help out, see what you can do. What should you do? It depends. Obviously, if you don't like police and you have problems with authority figures, your behavior is going to be different than someone who's always had very positive experience with police and has no problem with authority and following orders. Okay, this is not a judgment on either one of those people, but this is an acknowledgement that these are things that are going to cause different effects on their reaction to that particular situation. Big idea 3, social behavior is biologically rooted. Ooh, is there a gene for this? And I would say that there is, if you'll continue with me. Evolutionary psychology, natural selection predisposes our actions and reactions. So basically, if you think about this, if you think about Charles Darwin and evolutionary psychology, or evolutionary biology, excuse me, if you are a human being that tries to be completely independent and not use the help of any others, when